So in Chaf Vav, that second paragraph from the top, we have the word Haravi, the fourth. Haravi, if the Creator, blessed be He, bestows upon a person wealth, children, and gives him, for example, wisdom, understanding, and honor, he should not be arrogant about these things, rather he should actually increase his degree of humility. And he should benefit and honor people more so than initially. The more he has been given by God, the more he should share these things with other people. And that would be an attribute of humility. The person who is not humble would attribute these good points that he has to himself and want to keep them to himself and not share them with others, unless, of course, he wanted to demonstrate his superiority over other people by sharing these things with him. But a person who is generally humble will recognize that he has these strengths and not be haughty or lord them over other people, but actually use them to help other people. Like we find, for example, by Avram. When God says, we're talking here about God's plan to overturn Sodom and the other neighboring cities, and he says, should I withhold this from Avraham? Omar vanuchi ofar ve'efer. Avram's response is, who am I? Right? I'm just ofar, earth, efer. What's efer? Ash. I'm like so lowly, like earth and ash. So God said, should I withhold this information from Avram? To which Avram could have responded with a feeling of arrogance. But you see, he responded with extra humility. Rov chochma v'rov mamon hakaful ba'olam hazeh hihyeh mechmas echad mishloisha dvarim. An abundance of wisdom or of money in this world will be generally because of one of three reasons. It might just be a good thing from God. It's from the pure goodness of God. Secondly, it might be as a trial. God might give person an extra degree of wisdom or an extra degree of wealth in order to challenge the person. Perhaps he'll elaborate. Vashlishi lidakama. The third is vengeance. Interesting. Siman hatoiva im ha'ashir hazeh lo yase hezek l'shum adam b'mamono. And the sign for this will be, for example, if the wealthy person doesn't cause any harm to anybody else because of his wealth. Or a wise person will not use his wisdom to connive, fool, and manipulate other people. These people, the bearer of the wisdom or the bearer of the wealth, can actually add on to their service of God. Then these things will actually be good gifts from God. He said there are three things: for good, as a challenge, and as vengeance. So the first form would be what we just saw here. When a person is a sign that he has been given wisdom or wealth just through the goodness of God, is that he actually is using it to, he doesn't use it to harm anybody else. The second one then would be the next paragraph. V'siman hanisayon, an example of wisdom or wealth which actually be put in place in order to challenge a person. Shehei bal mamon torud al shmiras mamono. If, for example, the owner of the wealth, he is very preoccupied with the preservation of his wealth. He's always worried that somebody's going to take it or steal it or he's going to lose it. So that's not a sign of having a blessing. He has wealth, it's true, but what worth is his wealth when it causes worry? Of course, everybody has a normal, healthy degree of concern. But if actually, worried about his wealth, though it's not worth very much. And as a result, he really doesn't have any power over that money to derive benefit from it, because he's always worried and concerned. Kind of like reminds me, if you ever see, it's not exactly the same thing, but when you see animals eat, like birds, they peck and they look around. They peck and they look around. They peck and they look around. And the same thing with the grazing animals. They graze, but they look around, and their ears and their eyes are always... I thought to myself, my gosh, how horrible. They have nothing to do all day but to eat, and when they eat, they're full of fear that they're going to... Thank God that we don't have to eat all day long. And when we eat, thank God, generally speaking, you can eat in a state of calmness and tranquility. But there are certain people who are like that. They peck and they look around. They peck and they look around. Can you imagine having to live life like that? Pecking away and looking around. And there are people like that. They work, they earn the money, and they look around to make sure nobody's going to take that. That would be horrible. So this person then, this would be a sign that this is a test, about that the person is constantly preoccupied and worried about the money. Even if he, not like the first scenario, doesn't cause any harm to anybody, nor does he exemplify or exhibit arrogance over having the wealth. He's constantly busy trying to amass wealth, and preoccupied and worried about guarding it. As a result of this, he's really not going to be magnanimous and charitable to the needy, the poor. Lo machil v'lo malbish. He won't help other folks buy food and clothing. V'ken hacham, and so to the wise person. He may seem rov hachmaso al oilam hazeh l'taken tzorchov. If all of his intelligence is directed to this worldly matters in order to use his intelligence to improve and rectify his situation, ve'enu mischakem lo l'ra v'lo l'toiva, even if he doesn't necessarily use his wisdom for evil, but he doesn't use it for good either. That's all a trial. It's an important point. I personally, feel like I have to take that to heart, because, a person who can think and think things out clearly and has a way of, logically organize things might tend to use those skills for organizing his regular mundane, this worldly type of needs and interests. But in truth, this world is passing. It's fleeting. And if a person dedicates all of his time and energy and skill into organizing this life, but doesn't work on organizing his household in the world to come, so he's really going to be unfortunate. So that would be the second form. The third form, Siman Hanakama, a sign of God taking vengeance on the person by giving him this excess of wealth or wisdom, for example. She'bal hamamon mazik lacherim b'mamono. That a person should actually cause harm to other people through his money. Umizgaibo, and is arrogant about it. Ve'no sebo tzedakah, and doesn't give any charity. V'torod bo lisaneg, and he is preoccupied with it, not to use it for mundane good purposes, but just to indulge himself. As it says in a verse, people are full of happiness and joy, and they say, let us kill meat and let us shecht the sheep. Right? Because they're just being happy about indulging themselves all the time. Behold, the lyre and the harp and the drum and the flute and wine are their feasts, because they're just having orgiastic parties all of the time. Such a person will never be able to pay to God for the goodness that he's received, because he's using it for all of this self-indulgent behavior. Regarding this, it says, that wealth is guarded for its owner for bad. Meaning, there is a way in which God punishes a person by giving him wealth. When it's a person who, God knows, will use this wealth improperly, and as a result of that, he's actually going to undermine his very position because of that wealth. That's a situation where God will actually give wealth to the wicked, in order that they use this wealth to fuel their wicked habits, and ultimately receive retribution for all of the wrong they've done. And also, if the wise person comes up with all types of strategies to do evil and not good, as it says, they're wise, but to do evil. But to do good, they don't know. Then his wisdom for him is like a stumbling block. Why? Because he's using his intelligence, his wisdom, to do evil. Therefore, a person who's wise and intelligent, or more wealthy than others, he should use that resource wisely, in a good way. And add to his degree of humility, not to his degree of arrogance because of these things. And he should always be concerned, maybe this wealth of his is his reward, and he's being repaid for his reward in this world, which is going to leave him in the red in the next. Right? And he should be concerned. Things are going perhaps too good for me. This might not be a good sign. Maybe God is giving me my reward for my few good deeds here, in order, as the wicked, to repay them here and take retribution from them in the next. So if things are going too good, the Gemara says, on this is probably what the idea in the text is based on, if things are going too good for a person, he should consider perhaps that's not such a good thing. And such a person, it said regarding such people, God pays those who he hates, or alternatively, who hate him, meaning God, he pays them in front of their face. He pays them immediately for the purpose of destroying them. And the Gemara in Brachos discusses why, in the context of the more general discussion, why basically why good things happen to bad people. Why bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. One of the things that the Gemara says is that the wicked are often paid for their good deeds here in this world. And that's in order to take full retribution for them from their bad deeds in the world to come. And a question is raised, why? Why is it that it has to work that way? Why isn't the wicked paid for his wicked deeds in the world to come? And the converse is also true. A righteous person who suffers in this world is understood, or is explained by possibly being somebody who is being paid, having to take retribution for his misdeeds here, in order for his rewards to be paid in full in the world to come. So there's kind of an inherent question here, Usher, which is, make up your mind. If this world is a world where transgressions are reckoned with, and the proof is that the righteous have to reckon with their transgressions here, so that they have the reward of their good deeds in the world to come. So why for the wicked is it the opposite? Why are they repaid for their rewards here, and they have to make retribution for their misdeeds there? So one answer is, every person is judged according to the way he or she lives his life. God says, I want to do good for you. I want to pay you your reward in a world where in a way which you're going to most appreciate it. How will you most appreciate it? Look at a person and see, what's his main focus in life? Where is his main kind of attention? This world or the next? whatever his main point of interest is, God in his goodness says that's where I'll give him his reward. So a wicked person who lives his life in a this worldly fashion will result in God's paying him his reward in the world which is most important to him, which is where? In this world. The result is going to be in the world to come, he's going to have to reckon with all of his misdeeds. Whereas for the righteous, it's the other way around. The righteous live their lives in this world, of course, it's true, but their main point of interest, their main focal point is the world to come. So God says, my goodness dictates that I give you the good that's coming to you in the place which is most important to you. The righteous choose the world to come, that's where they get their goodness. The result is that the transgressions, whatever few there might be, have to be reckoned with in this world. So the Gemara there and the commentaries explain that's why, in this worldly terms, we see that often the wicked prosper and the righteous suffer. Each is being reckoned with according to his deeds or misdeeds. So that's what it's referring to here. God is Meshalem Lesoinav al Ponov Lahavido. God pays to those who hate him. He pays them in their face. What that means is, he gives them their reward now in this world, ultimately so that they should be lost in the world to come. The wise person should also be concerned that maybe he's of those folks about which it said, they're wise for evil schemes and not for good. Therefore, every person has to make himself as wise as possible and assert that wisdom in order to bring himself to good deeds. To the point where he's not able to achieve any more. If a person has a certain degree of natural intelligence and he wants to use that intelligence in order to earn a living, to support himself and his family, but he goes beyond what's required, thinking he can devise this type of scheme and this type of strategy in order to earn more money and to support himself more comfortably, that could be bordering on improper, incorrect. Because he should only use his wisdom to procure for himself and his family their immediate basic needs. After that, he should dedicate his mind, his thoughts to Torah study and to holy pursuits. That's a very difficult thing to do. Because the person wants to support himself, his family, in an honorable, respectable way. So he becomes an architect, for example. Now, there's an architect, he can earn so much money by working so many hours or taking on so many projects, and earn even more money by taking on more clients, more projects. The first case will be enough. But his intellectual, his academic, his professional inclination will be to take on more jobs to get a better reputation, or even more money and get even more respect in the field of expertise and so forth and so on. At some point, a person's got to be able to say, stop, even if it means compromising his professional career, because he can spend all of his life progressing professionally, even if it's with the intention of being able to support himself and his family. But he'll spend so much time, an inordinate amount of time, promoting his profession that he won't get around to learning or doing things Jewishly. So that's something that's very important to keep in mind. A person says, well, if I work more, I'll earn more, and I'll have not only more for myself and my family, but also be able to give more to charity. So wouldn't be able to work more in order to be able to give more charity? So that's true. That would be an altruistic intention, but a person's obligation, spiritually speaking, is first to himself. And it might be a good intention to earn more money to help more people. But what about yourself? You have to help yourself too. Help yourself spiritually. Nobody's going to learn for you. You've got to do that yourself. Chamishi, the fifth, right? The fifth indication of humility. Kishemochiach et atzmo. When a person is rebuking himself regarding the things he's done to other people, either with action or with words, and he doesn't really need those people for anything, Ve'enu mekaveh lekabel tov mimeno, and he doesn't have any anticipation of receiving anything good from that person. V'yelech ma'atzmo bilti havtzoros acherim u'mevakesh mimenu mechila, and he goes of his own accord, his own initiative, to ask forgiveness of these people that he's wronged. U'machnia atzmo milafanav, and he kind of submits himself before the person he's offended. U'mesaken eshives, and he rectifies in this way that which he's harmed and done wrong. U'medaber lo betachnunim, and he speaks to him beseechingly. Please forgive me, I'm so sorry. Gamze siman al-nava. This will be another sign of humility. Why? Because he's, number one, willing to admit that he's done or said something wrong. Number two, he's willing to ask forgiveness for it from a person who he doesn't need in any way. So it's not like it's really for himself. He's generally, and it's also not because somebody else has kind of nudged or encouraged him to do it. It's coming from his own volition. That's a sign the person is naturally humble. He's willing to recognize his faults, admit them, and ask forgiveness for them, even though there's nothing good that's going to come out of it for him per se, other than the mitzvah of humbling himself. So that's a sign that this person also, that's another sign this person has anava. And the sixth sign, the sixth indication, hashishi, sheyinhag ba'anava bedvarim rakim. He should act humbly with soft words. K'mo shenemar, ma'anei rach yoshiv chema. A calm response will repel anger. A person gets all angry, upset, and irate, and he starts speaking to you and gesticulating and making claims and so forth and so on. The person's natural reaction is to roll up the sleeve, and launch into him. Just like he's shouting at me, I'll shout at him. I'll show him who's boss. But a person who says, I can see you're very upset. I'm very sorry if I am the object or the reason for that. It wasn't my intention, or if it was his intention, you might say it's true. I did something wrong. I apologize. Stay calm, and in this way, he'll be able to diffuse this person's anger. So, speaking softly, then calmly, that's also a sign of humility, because most people would become indignant. Who is he to shout at me that way? To shout at me? I'll show him. That's all coming from arrogance. But if he's able to keep his calm and does not become indignant and offended, that's a sign that he is humble. In a low voice. Because this is a matter of shiflus, being lowly. V'shofalta me'eretz tidaberi u'mi'ofar tishach imosech. Shafalt me'eretz tidaberi, I guess from the low of the earth you will speak. U'mi'ofar tishach imosech, and from the dust shall you speak your words. So you see here that a person should speak from a position of humility. And he shouldn't be engaged in all of the ways in which people kind of adorn themselves with nice clothing and with decorations and jewelry and things like this. As it says, for example, V'sach einayim yoshia. V'shach einayim yoshia. A person whose eyes are down. What would be a phrase for that? Like not downtrodden, but a person who's got, like his eyes are down. So such a person will be redeemed. V'lo yisasek b'sa'anugim. He should not be engaged in physical enjoyment and indulgences. Kinyan shenemar, as it says in a verse, Tzaddik ochel lesoiva nafsho. A tzaddik eats only to satiety. He only eats to the amount of food that is necessary, that is required for him to eat. That would be his nefesh. The definition of a very obscure and old, ancient French term, which not many people are familiar with the meaning of nowadays. It goes something like, bon appetit. Yeah? Bon appetit. May you eat it with an appetite. Yeah? And I was being sarcastic about the meaning being obscure. In any case, in Hebrew, that's translated into a phrase which they say, b'ta'avon. Yeah? B'ta'avon. Customarily, people in Hebrew will speak before you eat, b'ta'avon. But ta'avon comes from the word ta'ava. So basically what you're saying with that phrase, b'ta'avon, is, may you eat with taiva. Eating with taiva is not a Jewish concept. We don't eat with taiva. So it's arguably incorrect, improper, not Jewishly right to tell a person b'ta'avon before they're eating. Let the French eat with taiva. Yeah, but a Jew doesn't eat with taiva. My father-in-law of blessed memory, my wife's father, Rav Tzvi ben Amram Zitzal, used to say, before people would eat, you don't say b'ta'avon. You should say l'soiva, l'sova. Like it says in the pasuk, tzaddik ochel l'sova nafsho. Your food, your eating should not be like the French, which is v'taiva. Yeah? Your food, your eating should be like a Jew, which is l'soiva. Tzaddik ochel l'sova nafsho. Your eating should be the sviyah. Whatever you eat, whether it's a lot or a little, meaning the amount that you need, it should be satiating. It should be fulfilling. It should be the food that you need, the quantity of food that you need to serve Hashem. So my father-in-law, blessed memory, always used to say that. L'soiva. I think it's a very beautiful idea. So next time, before saying b'ta'avon, may you eat in taiva, think rather more appropriately we should be saying l'sova. May this food be l'sova. May you get fulfilled from this food in order to be able to serve Hashem like a tzaddik ochel l'soiva nafsho. Kol elu hem simone ha'anava. These then would be the conclusion of the six indications of humility. Okay? Very nice. Now it goes on and to another section now. At the bottom of Chav Zayin. Hanava hu sulam la'alois l'darkei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Humility is actually like a ladder to raise oneself up to the ways of Hashem. Again, we've just explored this point that arrogance has the tendency of resulting in a person's going down. Humility to go up. And therefore he says humility is like a ladder to get closer to the ways of Hashem. Shneimar, as it says, Yadricha novim b'mishpat v'yilamed novim darko. God will direct the humble with righteousness or with justice, and He will teach them His ways, so the humble are directed towards God's ways. Umimenu yagia lahasig yiras Hashem baruch hu. And through humility He'll also gain fear of God. Shneimar, as it says, Ekev hanava yiras Hashem. Ekev, on the heels of hanava, humility, you'll find yiras Hashem. A person who is not humble, who is arrogant, will not attain true yiras Hashem. Because again, he's really not interested in God at all. He's interested in himself. Hashchina shora ala navim. And furthermore, the divine presence rests upon people who are humble. As it says, Eshkoin, ve'esdaka shafal ruach. I will dwell upon those who are lowly, downtrodden, and of a lowly spirit. V'kadosh Baruch Hu hita shechinoso al har Sinai v'yorad lamata. And another proof is that God brought His divine presence down onto the mountain of Sinai. Here in appreciation, in anticipation of Shavuos, which is coming up very soon, we have a teaching here which reminds us of the fact that God chose Har Sinai, the lowly of the mountains, to give the high Torah upon. Ve'hiniach kol harim hagvoyim, and He left all of the high impressive mountains aside. Uksiv hakitzu ve'rananu shoichne ofar kital oirois talecho. It says, there's a verse which talks about the resurrection. Hakitzu v'reinenu shochni afar. Arise and break forth in song, those of you who dwell in the dust, referring to the dead. Kital oirois talecha. because a dew of light is your dew, meaning a dew that brings back the light of life to those who are lying dead and in darkness in the earth. They will be redeemed and brought back to life through resurrection. That's the more simple meaning. The more metaphorical meaning is as follows. Mishanasa shochen la'afar, a person who in his life made himself like a neighbor of the dust. Meaning, he made himself lowly and dwelled in the same type of level that dust exists on. B'chayev b'olam hazeh, in this world, yichiyeh lo'olam haba, he will live in the world to come. That's right up, based on the verse here. Hakitzu v'rananu shoich ne'afar. Not literally, not only is it to be understood literally those who are dead lying in the ground, but those who were living in this world and made themselves as if they were lowly like dust, they will be brought back to life in the world to come. Uksiv, and furthermore it's written, Kiram Hashem v'shafal yireh. God is great, but the lowly he observes, he sees. So by acting humble, you're actually gaining God's attention. Umishe mesim libo kibasar, a person who makes his heart like a heart of flesh, tfiloso nishmas, his prayer is heard. Meaning a person might make himself hard-hearted. He's arrogant, full of himself, overly confident, so his heart becomes like hard. But a person who's broken, who's lowly, who's humble, his heart becomes, as it were, soft, weak, and his tears are close at hand, and he's much more likely to call out to Hashem in heartfelt prayer. His prayer will be heard. And it's often true. Many people who are not observant would not be praying otherwise until something goes wrong. All of a sudden, when something goes wrong, something goes bad, they turn out, Hashem, God, help. Why? Because those difficult experiences make a person broken-hearted. V'yovo kol basar lishtachavois lefanai, Omar Hashem. There's a prophecy which says that all flesh will come and bow before me, says God. Uksiv, shomer tefila ardecha, kol basar yavo. You hear the prayer of your community, all the flesh will come before you. What flesh? The flesh of the heart. The prayer which is offered with a soft heart, that prayer will be answered. And very often a person will think, well, he's got to assert himself and act in a very confident way in order to attract other people's attention, and they should know that he's in the room, or that he's a player. He has to be reckoned with. Why? Because he speaks loudly, he acts in a very commanding, forceful way, right? And he thinks he's going to command people's attention by that way. But often it kind of might draw people's attention to what he's doing, but turn their attention away from him because it's a turnoff. And you can have another person who acts more quietly, does things more subtly, right? And that actually draws perhaps more attention. You can think about, for example, you might have a room full of people, socially oriented, let's say men and women, guys and girls or something, and you might have a guy who's acting like a real, and then some other guys kind of like, or it might go the other way around. There might be some girl who's like acting bubbly and airheaded, and she's in the center of all of the attention and everything else. And there might be another girl who's like over on the side, and she's less assuming, and she's less kind of flamboyant and assertive about herself. Plenty of people might actually be, the attention of many people in the room might be actually turned towards the one who's less flamboyant. Still waters run deep. So the same thing here. A person who's acting arrogant and so forth and so on, God's not necessarily interested in that person. He's actually interested in that person kind of moving aside or shutting up already. Maybe acting, toning things down a little bit. Just get out of the way. Can we meet somebody who's a little more real here? And Hashem does the same thing. A person who's humble might have a lot more content, and that's what God is interested in. So we had a little reminder alarm that we should wrap things up. Let's do this last paragraph before we stop for today. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. It was said by Yeshua ben Levi, Kama gedolim nemuchei ruach lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. How great are the lowly before God. Again, you have that dichotomy. The greatness is in the humility. When the temple was in place, a person would bring a sacrifice, an oila. Schar oila beyado, the reward for bringing this offering to God is in his hand. Mincha, schar mincha beyado. If a person would bring the mincha, the meal offering, so the merit of having the meal offering is also obtained by him. But a person whose humble spirit, ma'ale alav kosuv, it is spoken about in by such a person. The verses consider such a person to be ki'ilu, as if he kriv kol korbanos kulam, as if he brought all of the korbanos. Shenemar, as it says, zivchei Elokim ruach nishbara. The sacrifice of God is a lowly or a broken spirit. So what they're saying here is, in the times of the temple, a person would bring one sacrifice or another, and you get merit for bringing that sacrifice. Humility is described in the verses as being equivalent to many sacrifices, which is considered as if a person is offered even when the temple is not in existence. So what's better? To proactively kind of bring a sacrifice, or to act in a way of humility? Obviously humility, because it's operative whether there's a base of Mikdash and when there's not. And it's equivalent not just to one sacrifice, but many. How do we learn that? From the wording of the verse which says, Zivchei Elokim, in the plural. The sacrifices of God are a Ruach Nishbara. So a person has a Ruach Nishbara, which is the broken spirit of humility, that's tantamount to offering many different sacrifices to God, which is operative even without the temple. V'lo'od, and not only this, Ella, shein tfiloso nimeses, his prayer is not in any way despised by God. Shneimar, as it says, lev nishbar, a broken heart, v'nitke, and also one is kind of repressed, Elokim lo tivzeh, God will not despise. So if you pray in front of God with a broken, lowly, humble heart, such prayer will never be rejected. It will be heard and will be accepted. Okay. That's a good place to stop, because the next phrase introduces the final section of Anava. Harbe anafim tovim tzomchim mishoresh Anava. All of the good things that come about through Anava. All of the wonderful things that can come out because of Anava.